2, and we're down to chapter 3. And then I'm going to demonstrate more Splunk, and you should, in case you didn't notice, CNET 50 and 152 are both doing the same Splunk projects to start. So you may be bored and wander away, but that's because Splunk is real important, and often I don't teach them both in the same semester. So, but we'll get into other things like Velociraptor later, and you can skip ahead to that if you like. But Splunk is good for you, but it is somewhat unprofessional and imperfect to have the same projects in 2 classes, but that's the way it is. Happens to me every now and then. And if I could get my hands on a QRadar project you could do, I'd throw that in 1 class. Because QRadar is great, but as far as I can tell, there's nothing resembling a free version. If there's ever some kind of free cloud version to train on, I'd be doing that. Anyway, but maybe I'll find something else equally important. Splunk just got bought, I think, by somebody. So maybe it'll be changing. I think Splunk got bought. Maybe I'm just confused. I'm not sure. I know they are. Maybe not. Somebody else I know got acquired that I'm teaching. Oh, I know Velociraptor got acquired. I know somebody else I'm teaching just recently got acquired.
There might be more acquisitions when nobody wants to act it out.
Yeah, and I know, yes, Splunk got acquired. I know it did because I got a contracting gig to teach Splunk SOAR, and I started writing it, and then they canceled it because Splunk got acquired, and SOAR will probably change. So I think Splunk did get acquired by somebody. Let me just look this up. This is actually Cisco or something?
Acquiring Splunk?
Is it Cisco? I forget who it was that acquired them.
Holy moly.
Yeah, Cisco. Cisco's going to acquire Splunk, and therefore...
The Times is from September.
And therefore, they may change things, so that's the thing to be aware of. Anyway, let's check here. Is the QRadar Community Edition? Yes, the QRadar Community Edition, I tried it years ago, and I couldn't get it to do anything. I spent like 6 weeks trying to get it working. So it was different in that I couldn't make it do anything at all. Maybe if you have much more powerful machines, you could get it to do something. I couldn't get it to install and run anything. So it's been acquired by Cisco, so things may change. Anyway, let's talk about incident response. So these are preparation before an incident. So when you get an incident, you're always going to have the same questions, sort of like, when police investigate a crime, they just have standard questions you ask everybody for procedure. What is the damage? How did they get in? Is the incident still going? What did they steal? What did they change? And what are our responsibilities? Are we required to tell people? This is a big one. People often try to avoid telling, for example, their customers and their business partners, and you should know to what extent you have to do that, which depends on what state you're in and what country you're in and things like that. How do you fix it? And how do we prevent this from happening again? These are always the questions every time. So you might as well be ready to think about those things. So you can prepare the organization, the IR team, and the infrastructure to be ready to handle incidents. For the organization itself, you have policies that identify risk. You have to consider the consequences of outsourcing IT functions. This can greatly impede incident response, although it can often save money and make you more secure because the outsourced company might be more professional and skilled at certain functions, but it does mean it'll be hard to coordinate with them in the case of an emergency. So you have assets of many kinds. You have your corporate reputation, you have your confidential information, your personally identifiable information of your customers and staff, and your payment account data like credit card numbers. All these are important assets to be protected, and they can be exposed in many ways. Unhappy employees are likely to make more mistakes or indeed just deliberately leak things maliciously or take bribes. Your internet-facing systems, if they're not patched, are at risk of takeover, and of course they're at some risk of takeover anyway because there are zero-day exploits that you don't know about and there is no patch for, so even patching isn't a perfect defense. And then there are threat actors, and people increasingly consider who would attack you and why would they attack you, and that will help you gauge what kind of defenses you need. So anybody on the internet in principle could attack your web-facing stuff. Some people may physically go into the building or even into the secure area. I remember this is a specialized art of penetration testing is physical pen testing. And I remember hearing a talk at a conference about a company that was pen testing a company in Pennsylvania in winter, and they had a secret location that nobody knew about. And their job was to find and break into the secret location, and they went on to social media. And at that time, there was Square, or Squarespace. It was a thing where you would log in, and people were using it, recording their physical location at work. So they were able to find it. Then they were able to find the building, defeat the alarm system, pick the locks, get in, and that's what you do. So I remember at that time also the U.S. military had to restrict social networking because people, I think in Iran, one of our wars in the Mideast, people were taking pictures and sending it back home, and the pictures had GPS coordinates in them. They were posting it on like public things like Twitter and Instagram, and the GPS coordinates were accurate that the enemy was bombing them based on those coordinates in real time. So that's when they said, all right, no more social networking. This is no good. All right, and so anyway, so you should have various policies that control what people do, that tell them acceptable use for end-device security policy, remote access, and internet usage. When mobile devices came out and everybody started using portable laptops and cell phones and stuff, smartphones, people said, are you going to let people use those? And also social networking. When social networking came out, they said, are you going to let your employees use social networking? And for years, most companies had no policy. And they said, you can't just tell people they can't do it. You have to have a policy. And the policy has to say what you can do, what you can't do. You should have a social media presence for your company, run by your PR department, and your staff should know what they're allowed to say about work, what would get you fired, that kind of thing. You have to consider these things. So if you're outsourced, then you got problems. If you ask for work, there might be delays, like you tell them I need to change the settings on the firewall, and they say, well, we'll do it next week. That's probably not going to work. Costs, you may have no way to get what you need. You probably can't get a full disk image of your cloud server. You might not even be able to get the log files. And so your service level agreement will be the thing that specifies what service they actually provide, and it may very well not include quick service for emergencies or forensic information to investigate an incident. And large multinational organizations have, of course, even bigger problems. There are varying privacy and labor regulations across nations and time coordination across time zones. And if you have large things like disk images that are in a different location, it can be really too much bother to move them to over the network. And then, of course, you educate your users. Try to warn them you don't click on links in phishing emails, and warn them about telephone phishing, which is bigger and bigger. People calling you on the phone to trick you into doing a bad thing, and now using AI-generated voices that sound like somebody you know to call you on the phone and trick you into doing a bad thing. Your staff has to be suspicious, and really you should verify all this. And for example, say the only thing you can do is tell me who you are, and then hang up, and I will call you back at our known number for you. For example, these sort of measures to try to prevent you from revealing information. And of course, if people are installing unauthorized software or old versions or social networking clients like AOL Instant Messenger and stuff, that's an issue, and you want to block it. As a matter of fact, I'm working for a contractor, and they banned TikTok, and I didn't think about it, and I put TikTok on my phone, and they actually busted me. You got to take TikTok off your phone. People keep saying it's great. I tried it for a few weeks. It seems like garbage. It didn't seem to learn anything valuable. It just seemed to get more and more worthless. I said, well, I could live without it, but I didn't think of that. I didn't think of my phone as being part of the network, but they said I had to put some agent on my phone when I got the gig, so they used the agent to scan my phone, and they busted me. So, well, okay, you're right. I had TikTok on there. Kara Swisher, if you're interested, said she has a burner phone just for TikTok, and I guess if I wanted to use it, that's what I'd have to do too. People say it's great, and the younger generation uses it, and you should really be putting stuff on there, but I can't figure it out. I think when I was a kid, it was the long hair and the Beatles and the hippies. The older generation just couldn't understand it. I guess I'm that guy now. I just can't figure out how to get any good out of it. Anyway, let's see if I got 152, chapter 3a. There it is. Okay. amazing. People say the AI in TikTok is so great and it learns what you like. And I noticed after like the first couple of days of using it, it was all crap. It was like nothing but TV commercials. Every single thing I was just skipping past it. So this AI is not working for me at all. It's totally failing to learn what I like. Seems to be focusing on sending me more spam. So when they told me to throw it away, I said, fine. Whatever value it has, it's not working for me. I think like Taylor Swift, I'm not the target demographic. You know, I can't understand any of her stuff either. Yeah, this, if you have anything to do, apparently younger generations are using it to a huge extent, like many hours a day. So apparently it's wonderful for them, but they're an alien species different than me. Like I know she got the Apple earbuds. I can't use them either. They fall out of my ears. I'm apparently not a human. Anyway, I don't appear to be a regulation human. Anyway, let's give it a shot. All right, so system administrator feels abused. This is a common situation, but what have you got now? For example, at this college, a whole lot of people feel abused. Most of the teachers and most of the administrators, pretty much everybody. And with good reason, I should say. Probably a lot of students too. But that's an exposure. When your staff is unhappy, that is a risk. They're more likely to do bad things. The people at Splunk have been very happy, all the ones I know. But maybe Cisco will do cost cutting and fix that. I don't know. They were getting paid a lot. Anyway, all right. Which item will increase responsiveness with outsourced IT? Some of my friends at Splunk were actually embarrassed to how much they were supposed to work. Yeah.
Where they didn't make us move to Outlook and everything.
Right.
And then they started to.
The same with Cisco and Microsoft and I think Google. I mean, there's a period of like planning, and then they cut the staff and change it and incorporate you into the product. And
They're not that, like, Cisco does do budget cuts and takes people out, but like you look at Meraki, they're
Yeah.
still on Google.
Yeah.
All these years later, they're like,
Yeah.
screw your Outlook. And you go into their offices and it's just as pretty as you would expect at the
well,
store.
good,
Lots of,
good.
You know,
So Cisco is a benign overlord comparatively.
they had catered lunches.
Well, I hope so. Remember, Yahoo was the worst. Yahoo would buy companies and just destroy them.
No, Oracle, way worse.
Oracle too, yes, yes.
Oracle's a pirate.
Oh, yes, yes. And Microsoft will change your product and make it sort of horrible and build it into their, like they did with Skype. They'll integrate it into their stuff and make it sort of irritating to use. You know, but anyway, different companies will buy you. I think VMware would buy companies and they run completely untouched. So it's all different philosophies. Anyway, the answer for this one is service level agreement with your outsourced company is how you would control what responsiveness you'll get. Which Cisco has a very good one. If you buy Cisco equipment, it all comes with go-level service, which means you will call them, and if it doesn't work, they will fix it, and if you can't fix it, they will have somebody on site replacing it within 24 hours, which is really nice. And they boldly charge twice as much for the stuff in the first place, but our college learned the hard way, it's better to just pay for the Cisco stuff than to go with the cheap HP stuff, which breaks and you can't get it fixed. Yeah. So what happens when you educate users? What good is that? This is a highly debated concept. Anyway, hopefully your educated users are less likely to install random garbage on the machines. And this is why there's a whole argument about this. People are really angry on both sides. Some people say user education is useless, it's only waste your time. Instead, you should have technical controls, stopping them from doing everything. Say, if you tell them what to do, they won't listen anyway, so you should just assume that they're the worst possible people doing the worst thing and have enough controls to stop that. This is one philosophy. All I know is when I get that mandatory annual training at my consulting gigs, it's completely worthless to me. But again, I think I'm not the target demographic exactly. So.
You're not.
All right, so what situation may make it difficult to examine their log files? Okay, of course, the outsourced IT. You may not be authorized to see the logs. For the winners, and I better go check for questions in the Twitch. I haven't been doing that. Let's see, all right. Finally managed to incompetently type that in. Let's charge ahead. Okay, so, I wanted to check for comments in the Twitch. Biden was apparently calling people and telling them not to vote. Right, that was a fake. That was one of those fake calls. Which there's going to be more of that. Yep, somebody did that.
Officially illegal.
Oh, very illegal. Yes.
Right, but like, how are they going to enforce it?
Well, the telephone company will have logs. You might be able to find the source of it depending on how they did it. Then they have a whole bunch of anti-spam phone call laws and stuff now, and rules, and it just depends on how smart they are. Like when people take ransomware in Bitcoin, if they knew what they were doing, you couldn't stop it. But in many cases, they can stop it because they're apparently idiots and they run it through public services like Coinbase. I mean, you can make your own Bitcoin address on your server and you can transfer funds directly to that address and nobody can stop you. But they apparently don't know what they're doing and they're using public resources. And so the Colonial Oil Pipeline, they paid the ransom and the US government got like 90% of it back. So the whole point of crypto is you can make that impossible, but you have to know how to use it. Anyway. And this is why the government often pushes these imperfect solutions, because they say, if you just make it a little more difficult to do something, that really will stop a lot of crime. They say there's some way around it, but a lot of criminals don't know that. They'll just use the simplest thing. Anyway, so preparing your team. For you to define your mission, you're going to try and respond to these missions with incidents with an organized process, conduct an impartial investigation, quickly decide whether it's an intrusion or not. And then if you assess the damage and scope. How big is the fire? Is it still growing? You want to contain it by isolating systems. Then collect your evidence and figure out who to ask for help when you need help. You must consider the privacy rights and law enforcement and legal considerations. Keep everything confidential about the incident. You don't just blab about it to the public. You keep it contained, and then you have a careful statement written by your PR department, run by the lawyers, saying the right thing and not saying foolish things. And you may have to have expert testimony if you go to court, testifying about this. That's happened at Congress last week, although that's just CEOs. But people may have to go to court and explain what you did and whether you did it. This happened recently. There was a guy who was prosecuted for mishandling incident, I think, at Uber. They brought in the CSO and prosecuted him individually because Uber did some really bad things. One of the things Uber did is they got hit by ransomware. The bad guys stole the data. They paid the ransom. And they said, we'll just call this a bug bounty and not tell anybody. And he discussed it and left an email trail of, this is an incident, we have to tell the government. Oh no, we'll just call it a bug bounty and then we don't have to tell anybody. He said, that's bogus, that won't work, it'll work. Well, okay. And they've got all the evidence of them conspiring to do this. And it turns out that was bogus, that's not going to work. And now they're all having to defend it. This kind of thing happens. So your legal counsel may want to be included. This is why you see this thing. If you put this message on an email or a printed document, then the point is it doesn't have to be disclosed in court. When you get sued, there will be a request for evidence. I forget the term for it right now, but they require you a discovery order. You must now provide every document about this topic, but documents with this on it do not have to be provided because they're confidential client-attorney communication. When Oracle sued Google over Android in a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit, there was an email from early in the development process from a developer saying, we better not use Java because Oracle owns it and they'll sue us. And they had this mark on it, but one guy forwarded it and took that mark off. So there was one copy that didn't have the mark on it. Now, there's an e-discovery tools you use, and they are supposed to catch this, because if even one copy has this note, then you don't need to disclose any of the other copies either. But they made a mistake, and they leaked that incriminating email to Oracle. And that eventually, Google won. It was eventually decided that their use of Java was in fact the open source use that you're allowed to use, but it could have gone the other way, and that email wouldn't have helped. Anyway, so attackers monitor email very often to see if they've been detected. So if you're emailing about the incident, you're probably tipping off the attacker. So you have to have an alternate method of communication like Signal or something to communicate in your team. So notice who's in your conference calls. There's a bunch of government agencies. And I've heard what's the scandals about the Republicans meeting and saying horrible things? They just had reporters just signing into their Zoom meeting and listening that weren't supposed to be there and stuff like that. So all my corporate consulting people, there's always somebody being very careful looking on a list. And if I'm doing something like phoning in from an unusual phone number, they totally notice. They do carefully make sure that only the right people are there, which is the correct good practice. All right, and also, make sure your automatically generated emails are not disclosing sensitive information. This happened to me a couple days ago. My phone started beeping in the middle of the night. A misconfigured device sent us all 900 emails. So it alerted us to some server misconfiguration. That was fun. Anyway, so you can encrypt your email too. There are email certificates available and free for everybody now from Let's Encrypt. So you often have to communicate with external people like agencies, and then you have to use the official approved channel. By the way, you should always talk to your lawyer. I mean, I found a bunch of medical data at the University of Louisiana that was open. I went to found their HIPAA office, and I told their HIPAA office, and then a month later they accused me of hacking them and tried to get me in trouble. So that was annoying. And when I said I'm going to get whistleblower protection, I found out that you don't get whistleblower protection if you notify the agency. You only get whistleblower protection if you go over the heads and turn them in with the feds, which I thought I would be polite and not do that. I thought I would tell them so they could fix it and not just go straight to the feds and get the feds coming down on them. But I should have done that. That's why I should. If I talked to a lawyer first, I would have learned the right way to do that. Anyway, yes, they published outrageous lies about me. I found the data, which had already been stolen 2 years before, and they accused me of being the guy that stole the data. And I'm like, hey, man, I feel greatly abused here. Like that administrator, I feel abused. Anyway, all right, so you got deliverables as you go ahead. Status reports to stakeholders in your company and a live response report, gathering data from a system, forensic examinations, malware analysis, intrusion investigation. As you proceed, you have these various reports of your investigation. You try to get trained IR team if you can find a training program that teaches them. The best cybersecurity places will do it, and those will be often the ones approved by the NSA, like we are at the moment, Centers of Cybersecurity Excellence. And then hardware. You need a lot of places to store a lot of data and keep it encrypted securely, a lot of external media to image drives and such. Powerful computers with the fastest I/O and storage and processor, because imaging a whole hard drive is really big, and forensic examiners get really expensive stuff in a pile of it. That's why they charge a lot of money and they spend a lot of it on hardware. And you have if you have a dedicated forensic lab, which large companies do, then you got powerful systems, write blockers, storage areas like a safe or a locked room, a bunch of clean machines with tools already installed, and so on. And remember, the general process, you always work on copies of data. You never work on the original data. You take the original drive, you make a copy of it, then you lock it up because that is the evidence. Here is the drive, wham, that was used to do this bad thing, and you only work on copies. Write blocking kits are important. A write blocker is a hardware device that lets you read from a hard drive without writing to it at all. This used to be incredibly easy. You could just clip one of the pins in those IDEs, the write pin, but now modern computers require the ability to write to the drive all the time. There's a logs, so as soon as it boots up and they connect to the drive at all, they want to write to the log. So the write blockers cost $300, and they actually have a processor in storage, so they tell your computer thinks it's writing to the drive, but it isn't. So they actually emulate the drive. But you got to have them if you want to do images of drives. You can also do it in software by booting to a Linux distribution and turning on write blocking, but that is pretty much for amateurs and students practicing. All the pros get hardware write blockers. Then disk duplicators and devices to acquire mobile devices. This can really be a drag. There are kits you buy that cost thousands of dollars that have dozens of connectors and devices to connect to all the different brands of cell phones and other portable devices. It can be crazy. There are so many old devices out there. Let me check for comments here. They can't block certain devices from attending a meeting. Oh, you could, sure. Yeah. But I don't think anybody does that because, in fact, everybody's traveling and using different phones and stuff. But I'm not. Maybe if you're working in a classified military or something, they might do that.
All the conference call systems I've ever used you can have a password for the meeting.
Yeah, you can have password to meet, that kind of thing too. Yeah, there's many ways to do it. Yeah, but I mean, it could also force you to use your official company device, I suppose. But that's very unpopular. I certainly avoided it ever possible because I don't want to have another device. But that would be one way to go. Anyway, then you got shared equipment, large drives, digital cameras, CDs, power strips, networks, computer maintenance tools, all pretty much the same stuff you need for tech support. You need to be able to take apart all these gadgets and access the storage media. If you want to monitor the network traffic, which you certainly want to do, then if you're doing some kind of temporary thing like during an incident, then you can just have a laptop, just a powerful laptop sniffing the network. But usually you make a rack mount system permanently attached to your network, and that's got a powerful computer, and it's got a separate port copying every bit of network traffic up there for handling. Because it turns out you need a lot of storage to store all that network traffic, and you have to have really fast processor to keep up with it. There are special software designed for this. Security Onion is the one I've used. This is like Kali is for pen testing. Security Onion is just for network monitoring. And I tried to teach my network monitoring course using Security Onion a few years ago, and the product was really sort of out of date and buggy and annoying. It's gotten better. There's a whole active community supporting it. So it's an option. It's a free way to gather and analyze network traffic. And like I say, if you use Security Onion, you will understand why people pay so much for Splunk. It is so much nicer and easier to use. Security Onion is like the free product of Splunk, and it's like OpenOffice compared to Microsoft Office, which is pretty similar. Technically, you can get like about 2/3 of the job done that way, but it's a whole lot harder. But you do save all that money. Instead of paying money for the software, you have to waste human life instead. Anyway, so. But if you're a Linux-oriented shop and software developers, then you might be happy just using the open source thing and modifying it to your specs. If you're experts, that would be the cool thing to do. But most people would rather just use a good commercial product that makes everything standard and easy. So, for example, many people think you have to use Encase for forensic analysis because it's the famous product and they market it that way. But in fact, the real evidence is the testimony of the expert examiner. So if you're an open source enthusiast and you understand your tools and you can explain them in court, that's fine. You say, I wrote the script, I used this open source tool, but I verified it and it really works and everything's fine. As long it's all in how much you impress them. I know open source forensic examiners that do that. They really understand it and they will say, my tool is better than that commercial garbage, and they're probably right. But most people, again, just prefer to use the standard commercial tool the standard way, and so they pay for Encase or FTK and use that. In any case, that's the point. The Daubert standard is the rule for admissibility of scientific evidence in court. And here's the idea is it scientifically tested? Has it been tested with peer review? Is there a known error rate? Are there standards? Is there general acceptance of the methodology? Has it been created for other purpose? Is the expert sufficiently qualified and explaining things well enough? And so on. And this is why, and it's constantly changing, as you know. They just recently decided that fiber analysis is no longer acceptable in court. And you still can't use lie detectors in court. And they recently had something about fingerprints so by. Just these things all pass. The rules keep changing as people decide to what extent does this new technique fit these standards. So there's a lot of software IR teams can use. There are special forensic distributions like Helix and Kane, and there used to be a forensic edition of Kali, which I wouldn't recommend using, but it was an option. And you got to have all kinds of operating systems available to analyze things. By the way, if you have a goofy machine and you're trying to analyze it forensically and it's booting up something awful, like Red Star OS or something, then you don't have that. What you can often do is make an image and then run the image in a virtual machine. And now you can run the software that the perp had to like open the documents. So that's an option. Anyway, live response, capture and analysis. You typically do it with scripts, but you can use Velociraptor or other tools and look for indicators. And there are forensic examination suites. And CASE and FTK are the high-priced commercial tools that have very powerful options. You can get options that will handle all the mobile devices, and it will even do live imaging of a hard drive over the network without notifying anybody. So you can like do an investigation at your company and decide somebody's embezzling, and we want to investigate important executives like the VP, but we don't want to tip them off because if they're innocent and we accuse them of that, they're going to be horrified. So you can actually push an agent onto the device and then suck the data off the device in the daytime while they're working without them noticing and analyze it without them ever knowing. The kind of thing you do if you get the high-grade NCASE and FTK. And the cheap stuff is Autopsy. It's what we're using in the forensic course I'm teaching here. It's free. And it's pretty nice, but it's like OpenOffice. It's the open source alternative to this stuff, which is free and has, only like 2/3 of the features. And so Velociraptor we'll use later. It lets you have one central point where you can now reach out to all the devices in your network and gather data from them. I want a list of all the running processes. I want you to look for these 10 specific things, that sort of thing. And of course, once you get centralized logging, use Splunk. That's what we're using in the projects here, or a similar tool to search through all these gathered logs. And so evidence handling, you got to maintain the quality of your evidence. So you should be under direct supervision, and there should be it should be packed up securely and then locked up when you deliver it somewhere, and you should have a chain of custody, which means each one of these people could go to court and testify, I did go to the crime scene, grab this thing, lock it in a bag, and then I kept it secure until I handed it off to the next guy who can testify that he actually did lock it up somewhere and didn't leave it unattended in his car or anything like that. And if you don't have a good chain of custody, then the value of the evidence is greatly decreased in court because there was a chance that somebody would tamper with it. And there are the government documents that give you these handling procedures and other recommendations available. And you should have an internal knowledge repository where you keep track of all the things you did on an incident so your incident response team can read about previous incidents. That's how you improve. You have to constantly improve your security handling if you want to keep up because the bad guys are constantly multiplying and improving. So you keep a record of what you've done for your internal people to read. All right, and let's take a look at another Kahoot, which is 3B. Those internal documents are important because often the new incident is because of the previous incident and your imperfect response to it. It's the same guy coming back, so you really do need to have records of what you did before. I didn't, but I know. Corns? Oh, horns, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I know the British, of course, made a big deal of all the different sheep for all the wool because sheep and wool is a huge, big part of their culture. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And they need the wool just like everybody else. Mostly for what? Oh, the meat, really? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. Quinoa, speaking of meat, anyway. I had to look up how to pronounce this. All right. All right, network monitoring software. Security Onion. By the way, I don't understand the name now that I think about it. I have no idea why they gave it that name.
All the layers, maybe?
I assume it must have something to do with layers. I know the Onion router, that's what it is, but you know, I noticed that that's kind of a strange name. Open source projects usually have offensive names like that. There was a guy that actually, when Ubuntu came out, they tried to go corporate, and one of the corporate customers said, "Dude, I cannot go to my board of directors and tell them I want to use something called Feisty Fawn. Will you please rename it Ubuntu Enterprise Linux version 3 or something, because then I could get it." You can't. Open source people like to rub your nose in the fact that they're not corporate, and they get to do silly things, but that means they can't earn money. Anyway. Okay, which one of these will protect the data on a stolen laptop? A real common problem these days. Full disk encryption is the only thing that will work. You have to have everything on the hard drive encrypted with something like BitLocker. Then it's not a data breach. You lost the laptop, but it's encrypted, so you didn't lose the data. All right, which one will prevent an email from being discoverable? That's the privileged label, privileged attorney-client communication. All right, and which one of these will collect information about running processes? RAM capture. RAM is where you'll find information about the running processes. You might possibly find some of it in the log, but you can't count on that. The RAM is where it's going to be, for sure. All right. Two-time winners. I remember in previous semesters, some student would complain, the same people keep winning all the time. And I'm like, well, anyway. All right, let's take a 10-minute break. I'll pick up at the